The subject that Naomi Klein and I have been working on since the publication of her book has been the emergence of marriage as a marker of class. And in writing about it, I'm going to present a variety of the sociological data which the public finally, in the last 6 months, seems to have discovered that when you look at family, you're not talking about a general set of patterns, you're talking about class. And we're suddenly waking up to discover that class has an explanation. The problem Naomi and I have had is, what does this have to do with family law? And it is remarkable how much you can read enormous numbers of cases that seem now to dissolve into incoherence and never see a reference to class or to the broad sociological changes I'm about to describe. But what we have discovered in reading endless numbers of cases about the marital presumption, about determinations of parentage, about custody and support, is that everyone agrees there is no longer a channel. We have no idea what it is. In today's talk, I'm going to argue that the failure to recognize the function of class explains, to some degree, why we are in the swamp, and it is class in connection with gender. The courts simply don't know what to do with women who are not on welfare, who are independent, and who have a child with one man, marry a second, and arrange for a third to be involved in raising their children. In red families versus blue families, we started out to say there's a new family system, and that system is actually a marriage strategy for the middle class. And we said there were a new set of norms. Invest in women as well as men's earning capacity. Emotional maturity and financial independence is the new marker of adulthood and readiness for family formation. Average age of marriage has increased dramatically. And for those who marry later, things are good. Deregulate sexual immorality, reduce care of sleeping with him as long as it's voluntary. But manage childbearing, it's having the child is what counts. Values, public tolerance, private responsibility, and an emphasis on quality. And the story we set out to tell in Red Blue was a story about how this should be the new norm for everyone, blocked by a red response. The red response, the red backlash, if you'll have it, about religious teachings about sexuality, gender division, family roles, areas of the country where the norm is younger average ages of marriage and childbirth, and the necessity. You see Irving Kristol lecture right about this. Women need to be taught about the necessity of marriage, the necessity of inequality within marriage, and the necessity of sexual morality. But the reason is that we need to persuade men to behave, and the only way to do so is to get women to create the right incentives to make them do so. But what we discovered when we wrote the book, and we wrote the book with the thesis that there might be a new set of national norms blocked by the conflict with traditional values, what we really discovered was class. And the emergence of marriage as a marker of class. Look at women's marriage rates. All the stories my mother told me were not true. If you go back and you look at 1970, you will see that the group most likely to be married were high school graduates, drops slightly as women get more education, drops off more for professional women. Lawyers, by the way, remain the worst. But doctors marry more than the regular population, women and men. And so what you saw is that class was not much of a marker of marriage, but to the extent it was, the more educated married less. Take a look at today. Straight line correlation with class, the most likely to be married are college graduates. 1980, yeah, sure, those who are more financially stressed, more likely to be divorce prone than those who aren't. The effect is small. You go to 2000, which is a good time economically. Economic distress makes people dramatically more divorce prone. Now why? Long, boring quote. But dual arrangements. Dual arrangements are linked with positive marital quality among middle-class couples and negative marital quality among working-class couples. What does that mean? Well, for the college-educated, the new norm, if you're not rich, is the two-career couple. They don't spend any time together, they have a lot of money, and conflict is way down. You look at working class couples, and the picture Amato puts together is, imagine now the guy doing construction and the wife doing social work. Farther down the socioeconomic ladder you go, the more traditional their attitudes about gender roles. The farther down the socioeconomic ladder you go, the less they can afford high-quality daycare. The farther down the socioeconomic ladder you go, the more she wants to be home with the kids. If she is working full-time because he is laid off, or because his job doesn't provide healthcare benefits and hers does, and she feels he's not carrying his full share in compensating with the kids and everything else, that couple has become much more divorce-prone. Today, what you see is that the belief in marriage is in fact a sign of class. And the most recent studies of the working class are skeptical about marriage, about it working, about it being a good thing, about the man being an advantage as opposed to a drag. I told my hairdresser, who raised a child largely on her own after her divorce, a line I saw somewhere about attitudes of women: I can support myself, I can support myself and the kid, I can't support myself, the kid, and him. And she said, yes, that's exactly right. And so this is news to me. And I think it is news to many of us who study this. What I have done in the end of the paper, which I'm going to describe very briefly, but the paper itself elaborates at great length, is to go back over the cases and say, where is class? I think class is part of what divides us and prevents a new norm taking hold, not just for the country as a whole, but even in conservative states. There is only one place where you see ever so slight bit of discussion of class. That's in reproduction, unplanned pregnancies. When Title X was passed in 1970, this is federal funding of family planning clinics. It was passed unanimously in the Senate. It was 32 no votes in the House and signed into law by Richard Nixon. Republicans in Congress are trying to repeal it. But today, that law was inspired in 1970 by statistics showing the unintended pregnancy rates for women below the poverty line were twice that above the poverty line. These are the statistics today. They are more like 3 to 1. This is a complex slide. But if there is anywhere where you occasionally see mention of class, it is about abortion rates of the poor and African Americans, and coming from Guttmacher, but not much of anybody else, the unintended pregnancy rates that are a direct marker of class. But the National Marriage Project, a conservative group out of UVA, actually acknowledged that attitudes about contraception and childbearing correlate strongly with attitudes toward marriage and have become markers of class that prevent national or unified family law norms we cannot channel in ways that reflect all of the people who are ending up in court.